We are now onto our science with no table. There's no table here. Okay, so very important thing when you're reading. I'm going to pause so that you don't have to sit here and watch me read. But while you're reading, remember that the science goes in order of like the same scientific method that you studied when you were in sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. You're going to be introduced to, you're going to have an introduction. You're going to be introduced to what the problem is. You're going to find out who's, the leader of the study, be introduced to, what the study is, and then you're going to find the hypothesis. So a lot of times the hypothesis is given to you by that person that's conducting the study. So it's a scientist, most oftentimes, some sort of scientist, and that scientist is going to pose a question. Unfortunately for us, it's not always with, in black and white in a question mark way, but what you do have to just be really looking for is once you're, into the first 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe the fourth or fifth paragraph, depending on how much information they're giving you, really look for what the question is around why they're conducting the research. That is the most important part. So once you understand the hypothesis, then you understand the theme. And the questions come directly from the hypothesis. Of course, there's going to be some questions about the findings. And, so again, we're following your scientific method. So there's a hypothesis, and then they do some research. They have some control groups, and then they give you their findings. When you're reading, as I mentioned, always be on the search for that hypothesis. And then you want to really start to think about at the end, what are they telling you to do? What is the next step? What is going to be done with this information? As scientists often do, once they conduct a research study, they take the findings and then they continue on. So really be on the lookout at the very end for what are they telling you to do. There will be at least one question with what's going to happen next. What does the scientist tell you what's going to happen next? All right, so we're predicting questions. That's why we're reading word for word. That's why we're marking the text. When you find the hypothesis, mark that. I haven't read it yet, so don't take my word for it, but I often put a big, bracket around it, like, got it. All right, I can go from here. And the same as, toward the end, what are we doing next? Found it. And so it's not always the last paragraph. Sometimes it happens a little bit earlier toward the end. But really be reading for the hypothesis and really be reading for, what are we doing now? I'm going to pause this because you don't want to sit there and watch me read, I'm sure. But we're going to mark it. We're going to come back together and we're going to talk about hypothesis. Of course, we're going to talk about theme. Of course, we're going to. I did probably spell this wrong. Okay, hypothesis. All right, pause, read, mark your text. Get ready to talk about that when we come back. Are you ready? Are we ready to talk about the answers? Okay, so overall the theme was there's something about this rootworm's gut bacteria. It's allowing it to thrive. I found the hypothesis. I wrote it only because I wanted to talk to you about it. But 9 times out of 10, I'm just going to underline it. You don't have time to, continuously be writing up here. I do want you to continue to write the theme, but you're not going to rewrite your hypothesis. So I found it online, 23, and I kind of kept it rolling for a little bit. But all in all, right there, there's almost some certain genetic differences that separate the rotation-resistant rootworms from their normal peers, but what are they? Researchers at the University of Illinois have been studying the problem since 2000, and despite generating a vast mountain of data, have failed to find the genes in question. The western corn rootworm has been an enigma for a long time, says Manfredo Schufferheld. This insect has the ability to adapt to practically all control methods deployed against it, including crop rotation, after many years of research about the mechanisms of rotation resistance. Results were mostly inconclusive. All right, so we have, why are we studying this? So I just wrote, what is the genetic difference between rotation-resistant rootworms and normal rootworms? I feel like we're in SAT. Do you feel like we're in SAT? I feel like we're in SAT. Yeah, we're in SAT. This isn't a typical Saturday afternoon light read. Okay, over the course of the passage, the main focus shifts from, so what happens in the passage? The main focus shifts from a statement about a challenge posed by a particular insect. To an indication of why that challenge was easy to overcome. It was not easy to overcome. That was very difficult to overcome. A summary of a once unexplained natural phenomenon. To a biography of the scientists who, no. To research that on it, there was no biographical information. Description of a problem affecting agriculture to an explanation of how scientists identify the cause of the problem. I love that one. See, I'm already going to circle it. Discussion about scientific field to an anecdote, a small little story, showing how research is done in that field. Nope. The answer is C. All right. So when we see these kind of things where they're, making a reference back to a line, we want to narrow it down to 2 before we even look back. Like, here's what you're going to see. Every other kid in the room is going to do this, and it's such a waste of time. So they're going to read this. A statement, zoology is ecology, mainly serves to, and you're going to hear this in the room. This is all you're going to hear. And every time you hear that, that's because College Board gave them line 6, so they think they have to look back to line 6. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to look back. You're just wasting time. So let's try to narrow it down to 2 before we have to look back. If we have to look back, we'll look back. But if we don't have to look back, I don't want to look back. I just want to keep going. So the statement, zoology is ecology, mainly serves to propose that 2 areas of scientific knowledge be merged. Zoology is ecology, mainly serves to propose that 2 areas of scientific knowledge, that, I don't really like that they said that they're scientific knowledge, zoology, they're disciplines. All right, we'll keep it. Point out that knowledge obtained in one field of research will lead to expertise in another. I really don't like that. Knowledge obtained in one field will lead to expertise in another. Assert a point about biological science that is supported by the example in the passage. Zoology, study of the bugs, to ecology, the study of all the things growing out in the fields. I like that one. Assert a point about biological science that is supported by the example in the passage. I like that one a lot. Suggest that one field of science research has completely supplanted another. Supplanted means taken over or gotten rid of, like it has become obsolete. It's not the case at all. So we were able to narrow it down to 2. Do you feel like you have to look back? I don't really feel like I have to look back. Propose that 2 areas of scientific knowledge be merged, or assert a point about biological science that is supported by the example in the passage. A point about biological science, zoology, and ecology, that is supported by the example in the passage. And they've given us examples of both zoology and ecology. So I'm picking C. According to the passage, one similarity between rotation-resistant rootworms and normal rootworms is that they both, interesting, so this kind of goes back, reduce crop productivity by extracting nutrients from the soil. No, they don't extract nutrients from the soil. Produce larvae that feed on plant roots of crops. That's exactly it. Adapt to crop rotation by maintaining high levels of enzymes in their guts. That wasn't a similarity between the 2. Contain some quantity and composition of bacteria in their guts. Oh, okay, so similarity between rotation-resistant rootworms and normal rootworms is that, but when we go back and forth between what the problem was, what the hypothesis was, then we're choosing B. Produce larvae that feed on the plant roots of crops. Which choice most clearly provides information indicating, so look at this. Oftentimes, I'm horrible at this. Oftentimes when I see this, I automatically think, oh, they're asking me for evidence. It's really a bad habit of mine. Obviously, they're not. Which choice most clearly provides information indicating how some rootworms have overcome farmers' efforts to eradicate them? They're not looking for evidence of the previous passage. So I just want to tell you about that because I'm kind of guilty of doing that. So what I want to look at is see, even though this is not an evidence one, I still want to see if I can get rid of any. There's one here on line 24. We're only the third one in. We're only the third question in. This has lines 23 through 35. So if we're following the question order rule, we can get rid of C and D. Because 43 is asking about the fourth paragraph, 23 through 35, which is after this, and 44 is asking about line 24, which is after this. So if we're following the question order rule, then we can get rid of those two. Between here and here, what are we looking for? Which choice most clearly provides information indicating how some rootworms have overcome farmers' efforts to eradicate them? Line 15, these to die. These rotations meant that rootworms lay eggs into cornfields, but their larvae hatch among soybean and die. That doesn't answer the question. That doesn't overcome. So it has to be 18 to 20, but to corn. But the rootworms have adapted the strategy by reducing their strong instincts for laying eggs in corn. Got it. That answers the question. The central claim of the fourth paragraph, lines 23 to 35. Again, before we start doing this, let's see if we can narrow down. I don't want to hear that yet. Let's see if we can narrow it down. The central claim of the fourth paragraph. Extensive study of the rootworm's genes was insufficient to determine why some rootworms are rotation resistant. Okay, that's true of the passage, so we'll keep that one. The rootworm's ability to adapt to pest control methods is unique among insects. That wasn't even, do you remember that from the passage? I want to get rid of that one. We're looking at two different types of rootworm. The genetic profile of rootworms is significantly more complex than researchers initially believed. I'm going to keep that only because it was very similar to our hypothesis. Our current understanding of genetics is inadequate to allow researchers to understand why that doesn't even make sense. Why that doesn't even make sense. Okay, so we're going to go back in the fourth paragraph, lines 23 to 35. We're going to see, was this about, there was a study done that was insufficient to determine why some rootworms are rotation resistant, or is it about the genetic profile of rootworms being more complex? Was it because there was a study done and it shows that they are line 23 to 35. Oh, I'm dumb. What's our hypothesis? I forgot. I mean, I didn't memorize where the hypothesis came. This question is about the hypothesis. What's the hypothesis? Extensive study of rootworms' genes was insufficient to determine. That was it. It was the hypothesis. What's the genetic difference between the rotation-resistant rootworms and normal rootworms? They're saying it in a different way. Some rootworms are rotation. What's the difference? I love that. I hope that you see that from practice. I want you to see that from practice. They say the same thing, they only say it differently. It throws some of my students because they want everything to be word for word. They want the theme to be word for word. They want the hypothesis to be restated word for word. Unfortunately, they're not going to do that for you. So, when you see something that is just stated so similarly to the hypothesis or theme or, whatever it is you're looking for, like I hope that at some point after our practice that it's just so clear that you're just like, oh, that says it, that says it, that says it. That's my wish after we study together for a while. Okay, line 44. As used in line 24, separate most many other means. There's almost certain genetic difference that the rotation-resistant rootworms from their normal peers, but what are they that differ? There's almost certain genetic difference from their peers. The word is separate. Yeah, we'll go with differ or difference. Distinguish. Is that a differ? Are you differentiating or difference? Yes. Discharge? No. Extract? No. Scatter? No. Distinguish. According to the passage, the gut bacteria of rotation-resistant rootworms help the rootworms survive in soybean crops. Yeah. Are responsible for lowering the amounts of cysteine protease in the rootworm's guts. Ooh, I'll have to look back. But this is yes. This I'm going to have to look back. Make the rootworms less vulnerable to being killed by antibiotics. Are transferred to the larvae that hatch from the rootworm's eggs. The gut bacteria of rotation resistant are transferred to the larvae. Help the rootworms survive in soybean crops, or are responsible for lowering amounts of cysteine protease in the rootworms. The gut bacteria, the rotation resistant rootworms. I think I remember it. Gut bacteria. I thought I underlined it. Maybe that's why I remember it. Gut bacteria comprise specifics that are unique to either the resistant or normal. These two functions also differ in the relative numbers of the bacteria that they share. The rootworms survive, are responsible for lowering the amount of cysteine. I'm just looking, where's that cysteine protease? The rootworms digest the protein in their meals using enzymes called, and soybeans defend themselves with substances. So the rootworms digest the protein in their meals. All right, let me reread the question. According to the passage, the gut bacteria help the rootworms survive, are responsible for lowering the amounts. No. A. You might have already known that. I had to look back. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? Can we get rid of any? No, we can't. Okay, so here's the deal. There's one more question. I know that because there's a big stop at the bottom. So there's one more question. Because there's one more question, I'm going to just assume that using the question order rule, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up because we're at the end, because there's only one more question. So we're looking for evidence that says the gut bacteria of rotation-resistant rootworms help the rootworms survive in soybean crops. These to soybeans, line 54 to 55. These two factors also differ in the relative numbers of the bacteria they share. Oh, sorry. Oh, I went to the wrong one. These different microbes give the resistant beetles an edge when eating soybeans. What are we looking for? The gut bacteria resistant help the rootworms survive in soybeans? Did you see that they said it in the same way? Same words. Okay. The main idea of the last paragraph is that cysteine protease are harmful to rootworms when presented in large quantities in the body. Do we care? I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe you're a rootworm fan. Sorry. Eggs laid by rotation-resistant rootworms will hatch into crops of laid by Bacteria unique to rotation-resistant rootworms allow them to digest soybeans. That's pretty cut and dry. I like that one. Rotation-resistant rootworms do not digest soybeans using... That's not true. Bacteria unique to rotation-resistant rootworms allow them to digest... Everybody else is still doing this. And you said, I'm going to narrow it down to 2. And if I have to look back, I'll look back. But we didn't look back. So we saved a lot of time. So, lots around the hypothesis. Theme question. So when you're reading, be very careful to be on the lookout for the hypothesis. Be very careful to just understand all in all the theme. And that will help you get through science. If there's any one section that my students still struggle with, it's science. And that's all there is to it. You gotta look for the hypothesis, you gotta look for the theme. I'm proud of you. Thank you for studying with me.